It's good to see everybody. It's good to see their faces. It's good to have them in here. We do have a nursery. I just want to let you know, if you're a guest, we have a nursery that's available just around that corner. If you go that door and to the left, you'll find it very easily. However, it's totally fine that I'm hearing crunching and squeaking and noises because, like Jim said, I absolutely believe that young people are a part of the church right now, not somebody that we shovel off to a back room until they get old enough, right, to behave or whatever that is, because I'm going to tell you something. I know you guys. I know a lot of you here, and there are some 70-year-olds here that still don't know how to behave, okay? So that's not what we're talking about. I just want you to feel comfortable. If the kids are making noise, that is totally fine. Couple other things I want to make sure you know. If you are, and we've got some guests here, and that's great. Welcome. I'm glad you're around. If you are a regular tender, though, it's fine. It's fine. We're all unhappy sometimes. If you're a regular attender and you get my emails and you're on our database, if I've got your information, you will receive a letter at some point this week, that on the back it might have a label or a sticker or something that says, "Do not open until April 17th," I think is what we said. Is that right? Am I wrong, Julie? You're looking at me like I'm wrong. Okay. It's next week. It's the following week. Anyway, it'll tell you on the sticker, don't open till it, right? So it doesn't matter. Don't open till that date. Just saying that. We'll talk more about that next week. Big surprise, big fun. But play with us, okay? Get the letter, put it somewhere safe. Don't open it. Just pray and wonder and live in the mystery. I remember, I don't know if you've ever seen this. If you've not, it's kind of fun. J.J. Abrams' TED Talk. He talked about a mystery box and how sometimes having a box of a mystery is sometimes more fun than opening the box and finding out what's inside. And if you've ever seen Lost, that'll make sense. But anyway, you're getting a mystery box this week. Wait until the date on it to open it. That was my 2 cents. If you're not on our list and if you text the word connect right there to that phone number, it'll take you to a little form. If you fill it out, you might get that mystery letter as well this week if you do that soon enough. So the word connect to that number. I have that number saved in my phone as BCC text, by the way. Just makes life easy. There's a whole bunch of things like that. Give, serve, ask, connect. So there's some things you can know. Also, if you just text the word hey to that number, you can send me a text. True story. Anyway, okay. Hey, H-E-Y, not H-A-Y. Like hello. Okay, all right. So today we're going to actually be looking at Matthew chapter 28, first few verses. Easter. It's Easter. Now this past week we call the week that culminates on Easter Sunday, Passion Week, or things like that. Holy Week, sometimes it's called, and it's a week to contemplate, think about sort of the sufferings of Jesus, right? All that he went through, and if you've seen the Passion of Christ, you get it. Friday night, we talked about the silence of God, the fact that sometimes God just seems like he's not even listening, not answering, not around. C.S. Lewis, in a time of suffering, wrote this: "No one ever told me that grief felt so much like fear. I'm not afraid, but the sensation is like being afraid. The same fluttering in the stomach, the same restlessness, the yawning. I keep on swallowing." He's talking about the physical. Grief affects the body, and it does, and it's very similar, he says, to fear. And I think that's true. When we left here Friday night, we might have felt in our bodies even, possibly, a little bit of the silence of God, the absence of God. We talked about the double bolting of the doors from the inside. We were supposed to. I hope we felt just a little bit of that. But Easter, the last day of Holy Week, is the first day, really, of the rest of our lives, and it is God's ultimate answer about fear and grief. So let me read this passage from Matthew 28, just 10 verses. "Now after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he is risen, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he is risen from the dead. And behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I've told you." So they departed quickly from the tomb with fear and with great joy and ran to tell his disciples. And behold, Jesus came and met them and said, "Greetings." And they came up and took hold of his feet and worshipped him. And Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me." Let me pray for us. Jesus, you're alive. You're good. If you're alive, you can work even now. I pray that you will work through your word in our hearts, in each and every one of our hearts this morning. It's in your name we pray. Amen. If you have ever felt the silence of God, the absence of God, and wondered, where is God in this moment? If you've ever felt that, and I suspect many of us have, if you've ever felt that, the resurrection of Jesus means that God is working even in the silence, even when God seems absent. That's what the resurrection means. 3 days of misery, silence, loss, absence, devastation. And then what was God doing in those 3 days? What was Jesus doing in those 3 days? You know, we don't really know. We got some theories. There's a few verses in the New Testament that say things, interesting things, like 1 Peter chapter 3 says, "For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit." And this is where it gets weird, and people are like, what does that mean? "In which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey, when God's patience waited in the days of Noah." Now, there's a lot of questions about verses like this. Like, what is that talking about? And we don't know for sure. We don't know. I mean, you know, sometimes there's mystery. But one of the theories, like, you got to understand, the Greeks and the Jews, which in many ways is the audience that Jesus spoke to, they had sort of similar, but slightly different perspectives on what might be called the afterlife. And it was actually maybe called the after death. In both of their sort of worldviews, they had the Jewish word was Sheol, and the Greek word was Hades. And there were places that you went when you were dead, and that was it. Like you were, and it was Hades, underworld. Both are considered to be underworld, not the way we think of hell, just simply the place of darkness and mist. And by the way, that was it. They didn't have a whole lot other than, right? We have this wrong idea in much of Western Christendom. We have this wrong idea that if you're good, you go to heaven, and if you're bad, you go to hell, which is completely wrong. I wish I could just rip all that out of our heads. It's just not true, but that's our idea. Their idea was if you're dead, you go to Hades or Sheol, right? That was it. And so some people suspect that what this means when he went and preaches to those souls in prison, he's going and preaching the good news and hope to the people who are no longer there. That's one theory. Maybe that's what he did in those 3 days. I don't know. Another verse, Ephesians 4, says, "When he ascended on high, he led a host of captives." I love the imagery, and it helps us to understand history and stuff to kind of get some of this. But what's cool about that is Paul's referencing a very Roman military thing, leading a host of leading a parade and bringing all the people that you've been victorious over with you, right? And what some people suspect is that as Jesus is rising victorious, he's leading people out of the underworld, which would be a very Greek idea. Like there's stories If you know any Greek mythology, right? The Greeks had this idea that people could be led out of the underworld. And so that's what Paul's saying, is that in his victory, he's leading people out of death. I think there's some truth to that, even though it's a little mysterious and odd and weird. And is that what he was doing in those 3 days? Maybe. We're not sure. What we do know is this: God was absolutely doing something. He was at work in those 3 days because Jesus was going to walk again and come out of the grave. How do we know that's true? Like, really? I've had people say to me, that's just crazy. Dead people don't come back to life. Like, yeah, I get it. I know that. I understand that. That's why it's kind of cool that he did. Obviously, it's a significant miracle if he really did rise again, really walked out of a grave. Like, that's significant if it's true. But how do we know that it's true? Just a few things. Number one, and pretty significant, I don't know if we realize how significant it is, like the disciples could have made this stuff up. Let's just acknowledge that, right? They could have. Some guy could have been like, I tell you what, let's do. Let's make it look like Jesus rose again, okay? And we'll do this whole deal. And so if that's what they were doing, the absolute worst thing that they could do, and I'm sorry, ladies, I know this might be a little bit offensive, I'm sorry, is make women be the first witnesses. Because women in this era, in this time, their testimony, their word, what they say they saw, like in a court of law, doesn't make any difference. Nobody cares. And I'm sorry. We shouldn't live in that world. The world has always been and always will be a broken place, okay? But at one time, and at this point in history, a woman's word meant nothing. So why would you make women the first witnesses? I'll tell you why. Because they were. It's the only reason to say it, because they were. They were the first witnesses. It's just bad fiction. If you're trying to make something up, you'd be like, it was John was the first one that saw him. No, it was these women. You wouldn't do that. The tomb, there's another thing. The tomb was actually empty. Like, the tomb was empty, which I think is astonishing. Now, there's a few ideas. There's a conspiracy that's raised in the passage I read, starting in the next verse. They raise this idea. Some of the Roman leaders are like, followers must have stole his body. Okay, let's talk about that. His followers stole the body. Almost every single one of them chose to be murdered rather than say, we made it up. If you make up a lie, are you going to die for that lie? That's pretty significant, right? Almost all of his followers chose murder because they said, no, I saw the risen Jesus. I'm just saying. Another thing is, why would you even do that? In the culture of the world that they lived in, the Messiah, the expectation was that he was going to be a military leader. That he was going to conquer Rome, drive Rome out of Israel, establish a new kingdom and a whole power thing, and have everything was going to be good, right? We're going to be on top again. This guy goes to the cross and dies. And you're like, that's the Messiah. Like, go find another one. They were a dime a dozen in Israel at the time. You could find 17 people on any street corner who were claiming to be the Messiah. It happened all the time. If you're Jesus' follower and he's dead, you go find somebody else. Like, really, you grieve, you get on, and you move on. You don't steal the body and make up a lie. It's ridiculous. You wouldn't do that because you want a military leader. There's another idea that he was almost dead, after being crucified, by people who perfected the art and were excellent at crucifixion, by the way. After being crucified and stabbed in the side, that he was, almost dead, that he kind of, passed out, but sort of just had a little bit of enough electrical activity to kind of sort of revive in the grave, push the stone out of the way, and fight off a couple of Roman soldiers. I'll just leave it at that. Then the fact that Jesus appeared at the time, I mean, we have these witnesses, written records, and this isn't just like, some of us think, oh, well, that was written in the 1500s. It wasn't. And it was written by a lot of other people and things that didn't make it in the Bible. A lot of people who said, I saw him, those people saw him, go ask. They all live in town. This all happened in Jerusalem. It wasn't that big of a place. It's go talk. All these 500 people saw him. You go ask. And it doesn't get refuted. And a lot of those 500 people died because they said, oh no, I saw the risen Jesus. And all they had to do was say, we made that stuff up. Right? There's a lot of evidence that Jesus actually walked out of the grave after 3 days. And if he did, then God was working during a time that felt silent. Out of death and destruction and misery and loss, God brought about the greatest human event that has ever or could ever happen, and put death to death. Killed our first enemy, destroyed the first enemy of humanity, death. And with an empty tomb, he promises to end up defeating all of our enemies: sickness, hunger, poverty, broken relationships. Some of us know what that's like. Broken hearts, broken selves, shame. That feeling that many of us have that I am not enough, I'm a mess, I'm not worthy. He's going to defeat all of that. Whatever fear and grief we might feel in the silence and the absence of God, you got to know that he is at work, even now, even then, to bring about new life, because that's what God does. And we can believe this because the grave really was empty. But because the grave is really empty, there might be, and I just need to point this out, there might be reason to fear. Because notice what happens. A few times fear is mentioned in this text. But the first time it's mentioned is in verse 4. It says, for fear of him, the guards trembled and became like dead men. Like that, they were afraid. Their lives literally depended on an empty grave. Think about that for a minute. Their lives literally depended on an empty grave. That they could, because they were derelict of duty. Their job was to make sure that nothing changed that grave stayed closed and the body stayed in it. That was their job. And if they didn't do their job, their lives were at risk, first of all. But they were not followers of Jesus. And they had a whole life plan that in many ways required that he stay in the grave. Mainly, their plan was to keep on going exactly the same way they always had. That was their plan. I'm betting some of us here today have a similar life plan. You want to keep right on going the way you've always been going. And that demands that Jesus did not rise from the dead. So what might that mean? For some of us, I suspect it means that we need to fear. Because we want to prove our own righteousness. We like to prove to other people that we're better than them. Now, I know a lot of church people that do this, and they morality shame others, right? Oh, you can't do this, right? My kids are better than your kids, right? Or whatever. We do that, don't we? We morality shame. I don't smoke. I saw him at the liquor store. I saw the pastor picking up a six-pack the other day. Right? Whatever. We like to moral shame. And that's true when church people do that. But I'll tell you something. Unchurched people that don't want anything to do with the church, by the way, there's a strong movement that goes, maybe it's different issues, but I'm better than you because I'm more woke about whatever issue, right? And it's still, there's a lot of shaming. I mean, what is canceling someone if not saying, I saw him at the liquor store, right? Like, oh, he messed up and said a bad thing on Twitter. Let's never listen to him again. Like, it all comes from the same heart of I'm right and you're wrong. I'm better than you are. So whatever our allegiances to different morals are, understand the human heart carries this strong desire to prove I'm right, you're wrong. The Pharisees were doing it in Jesus' day. That was the whole thing. That's one thing we like, just prove that we're better than you. Another thing we do is we stay in our shame. We hold our secrets close. Those voices, that say how bad we are. Well, you know what you did. You know that thing that you can't ever tell anybody. And we lock that down tight, and we keep that stuff secret, and we hide in it. And sometimes we hide in that for generations. This might feel like the opposite error, right? I'm better than you while I'm worse than you, right? But it's rooted in the same place. It's rooted in a heart that needs to be enough by itself. And Jesus wants to interrupt that. He wants to interrupt our righteousness, and he wants to interrupt our shame. And so that's a reason to fear. Another big reason to fear an empty grave is that I can sort of do my own thing feeling, which I think is also true of the human heart. When I think of this, I think always of the great poem, fantastic poem, and yet it's vile. It's called Invictus. It's by a guy named William Henley. Want to write his name? Yeah, William Henley. William Ernest Henley. He you might know it. It culminates, the last line is, I am the captain of my soul, I am the master of my fate. That is the way it ends, and that's the tone, really, of the whole poem. If you don't know it, you might know the song My Way. Similar, right? Frank Sinatra, Elvis Presley. Later, Sid Vicious did it. It depends on your genre picks, but it's been covered by all. It reflects, both the poem and the song, sort of reflect what I'm trying to get at, this common human sentiment of I am in charge of my life and I can do what I want with it. And by the way, that poem, Invictus, was quoted on the deathbed of Timothy McVeigh, mass murderer, Oklahoma City bombing, killed 168 people, if you remember that. And that was the last words out of his mouth, too. I am the captain of my soul, the master of my fate. It's a common thing. And for people who hold this view, and for people who want to be sort of the captain of their soul, the empty grave is a terrifying, terrifying prospect. And it might cause us to fear the way the guards trembled, because the empty grave demands something else from us. But it's interesting what it demands. It demands, in a sense, the end of fear. That's what the empty grave, twice. So once it tells us the guards trembled in fear. But then 2 times in this story, the followers of Jesus are told, do not be afraid. So they're tempted to fear. And this is the first and most reasonable response, right? I mean, you see somebody that you know is dead up and walking around. You see angels and they look like a flashing light and Jesus is talking to you. It's a reasonable response to be afraid. Like, let's be honest. I'd be scared to death. So when we're confronted with an empty grave, we might too be tempted to fear, right? Might be tempted to fear just for the rationality of, oh my gosh, an empty grave. But think about it. That means we're not righteous. It means if you're sitting here really trying to prove to other people how good you are and how much better you are than them, you're wrong about it. You're not. You cannot be good enough to rescue yourself. So you might be tempted to fear. It also means a loss of shame. It might mean we let go of that. Shame can be kind of like a warm protective blanket we just hold, wrap around ourselves and keep us safe from the dangers that are out there because the world is dangerous. But that blanket has spikes on the inside and it's causing us to bleed to death. So we might be tempted to fear unwrapping that. We might be tempted to fear because if the grave is empty, we're not the master of our fate. But we don't have to be afraid because the words to Jesus' followers are, do not be afraid. Why? Because it's okay, you're not perfect. All you do is admit it. Jesus is perfect for you, on your behalf. He is the answer to your own imperfection, which you have. So let go of fear and just say, I'm not perfect. I'm a mess. I'm a mess. In fact, let's just take a break. Everybody shake it off. Everybody with me say it. I'm a mess. I'm a mess. Yes, you are. Trust me. And so am I. And you can accept yourself as a mess because Jesus does too. He accepts you just like you are with all the mess. It's okay. You can let go of that need to be perfect. That shame, those voices in your head that you hear reminding you of your unworthiness, how dirty you are. That blanket, you can unwrap yourself from that blanket without fear of the dangers in the world, because when you unwrap that shame blanket, which by the way means be honest, find a counselor or a trusted friend that you can say, this is what shame I'm carrying to. Just be honest. And let that blanket fall to the ground, and here's what happens. Jesus will embrace you. And that's so much better than that pokey blanket. It will wrap you up. And you don't have to do it anymore. You don't have to be afraid. That's what it requires. Don't be afraid. Let it go. You don't have to fear because He is a far better master of your fate than you are. Trust me. The masters of their own fate include, let's see, not just Timothy McVeigh. Let's see, Stalin, Hitler, Mao Zedong, Pol Pot, all masters of their own fate. Frank Sinatra, Elvis, and Sid Vicious. None of them did so well. And all of them, by the way, are still in the grave. They also include just any number of miserably unhappy, multi-time over, say, divorced, thrice divorced politicians. I'm not talking about divorce here, I'm talking about politicians. Celebrities, multimillionaires, CEOs, executives, people that you think look like they got their life together, they're not happy. But they're the masters of their fate. How's that working out for them? No. When we take over the direction of our own lives, without exception, we leave nothing but woundedness and brokenness in the wake of our lives. Every time, trust me, I see it often. We hurt people, and sometimes we hurt ourselves. In fact, very often we become one of the tragedies in our own story as we move forward. It just doesn't work. We leave wreckage behind, but Jesus doesn't leave wreckage. When He's the master of our fate, He doesn't. He leaves healing, He leaves wholeness, He leaves health, He leaves what the Bible calls shalom. It's a word for peace, but it means all is well. Everything is as it should be. He leaves all of this behind. He leaves in His wake new life where there was death before. That's what Jesus does when He's the master of our fate. This Sunday, just like on all Sundays, just like every Sunday, this Sunday, Jesus reminds us that because the grave is empty, there is a whole world of freedom and hope and life and light available to each and every one of us. But the freedom and that new life demands one thing from us. We got to surrender. We got to surrender our need to be right. We got to surrender our shame. We got to surrender our very lives. That's what it requires for us to inherit and inhabit the new life that Jesus has purchased for us. And the question becomes, what will you do with an empty grave? And don't get me wrong, this is one of the huge mistakes, along with thinking if you're good you go to heaven and if you're bad you go to hell, right? Terrible, terrible theology. Terrible theology. Here's another one that's just terrible theology. That you do something with an empty grave once in your life. No, you don't. You and I need to do something with an empty grave every day, because I've done something with an empty grave years ago for the first time. And every day I still think I'm right. Every day I think, oh, I can't tell anybody about that. Every day I think, I'll do what I want today. Every day. And every day when I make those decisions, I leave wreckage. And every day I need to come to Jesus and say, no. The grave is empty. Jesus, help me to let you have all this stuff. That's what we got to do. What will you do with an empty grave today? We're going to turn to communion.